If someone was to ask me what my favorite Game Boy game was, this is the game that comes to mind first. I know I've said this before, but I really feel that around 1991 or so, developers got into a groove and really knew what to do to make a really strong game for the Game Boy. It looks good and plays well, and this is just an excellent example of that. Let me show you just what I mean. From first inspection, you see that for a game with the limited palette of the Game Boy, it still has a great detail to the characters and the landscapes. This footage here comes from my Retron 5 and an Elgato HD capture device, so it looks extra pretty. But even back in the 90s when I was playing this for the first time on an original Game Boy, it's really surprised me how good it looked. Then there's the music. The music on this is my absolute favorite of all Game Boy titles. It has so much personality and variety to it, and some of it isn't as Zelda-like as music in other games, but it fits this game so well. Even today, there's something about the Ballad of the Windfish that really stands out to me. It's probably one of my favorite bits of music on all of the Game Boy. I really think that the quality of visuals and sound are testament to the time and care that went into the creation of this game. Legend had it this game had its start as a port of The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past that was being developed as a side project by Nintendo's staff after hours. From there, it grew and took on its own life as an original game with an original story. The influence of Link to the Past is very obvious in the art design of this game. While it's a younger sibling to the 16-bit entry into the Zelda franchise, it has its own personality and introduces quite a few elements which carried over into later Zelda titles, and I'll get into those a little bit later. By now, I think you already know about my opinion and thoughts on the timeline of the Zelda series, so I'm not going to trouble you with that. This game could really fit in just about anywhere. There are no returning characters aside from Link, and not unlike in Majora's Mask, it takes place somewhere other than Hyrule. In this story, Link finds himself shipwrecked and lost at sea. He washes up unconscious on Koholint Island and is discovered by a girl named Taryn. She brings him to Mabe Village, to the home she shares with her father Marin to recover. Link makes his way back to the shore and recovers his sword, and then encounters a talking owl who acts as a guide for Link in this game, who tells us about the windfish who needs to be awoken in order for him to return home. Link then sets out to collect the 8 musical instruments hidden in dungeons across the island. Playing them all will open the last dungeon and ultimately wake the windfish. And that's the story in a nutshell. Or an eggshell if you prefer. There are a lot of elements to this game that I think are so great, like how self-aware this game is. The kids that break the fourth wall and tell you things like how to save the game always amused me. The inclusion of elements from the Mario series like Shy Guys, Pokies, Wart, Mario's face on your wall, a photo of Princess Peach, and some really angry looking Bob-ombs really made for a huge change of pace from the Zelda series. Those aren't the only characters from Nintendo games. We've got Dr. Wright from the Super Nintendo SimCity, and Prince Richard from a Japanese Game Boy title which I don't think was released anywhere else. Naturally, I got a huge kick out of that sort of thing back when I was 13 or however old I was when I first played this. Something I realize now which I had no clue about before, mainly because I had never played Ocarina of Time until more recently, is how there are a few elements in this game that carry over into Ocarina. The most obvious one being the ocarina itself and needing to learn to play songs on it. The mysterious owl guide is another, and one that really stands out to me is the ability to ready your shield, which becomes rather important in some of the later games. Also, while we're at it, Marin and Taryn may have only inhabited Koholint Island, but characters named Melon and Talon appeared in several later Zelda games. Many interesting elements, great graphics, and sound are all important factors in making a good game, but they don't mean all that much if the game doesn't play well. The gameplay in this game is pretty decent, but not without its own shortcomings. You pick up all the familiar sub-weapons and choose where to equip them between the A or B buttons. You can also choose which of those buttons uses your sword, or even equip more than one sub-weapon at the expense of giving up your sword until you equip it again. You switch out the sword and the shield, and sometimes you just have to do it. The shield, it's not such a bad thing. Some of the items or sub-weapons are just way more useful anyway, but Link without a sword is like a day without sunshine. Having to equip and ready the shield does seem to decrease its effectiveness, but having the added abilities of being able to push or bump with the shield are things you never could have previously, and I don't think they could exist without having the ability to ready the shield, so I can see why they did it. Most of the time though, I usually kept the bracelet or the feather equipped. The feather is one of my favorite items they added into this game, giving Link the ability to jump in the overhead environment, and also in the side-scrolling sections too. Wait a minute, did I say side-scrolling sections? You heard me right. Remember the tunnels in the original Legend of Zelda? We'll take that and add in a huge helping of Super Mario Bros., and it's kinda like that, complete with Goombas and Piranha Plants. Using the feather, you can even stomp on the Goombas just like Mario, which is totally out of place in a Zelda game, but I love it. Just like with most Zelda games, there is some excellent problem solving required to get you through the dungeons. Coming off A Link to the Past, there was no way Nintendo was going to slack off when it came to this. Even finding the hints were a bit of a puzzle, requiring you to find stone slabs to complete a tablet on the walls. While I feel much of this game is somewhat easier than its 16-bit sibling, there are a few things in the dungeons which will leave you scratching your head. But one thing I find really neat about these dungeons is that all of them have a mid-stage boss encounter, and while you need to defeat this mid-boss to progress, doing so activates a teleport, which will send you to and from the entrance room, which is very handy if you get yourself killed. Also, much like A Link to the Past, there are always tricks to beating most, if not all, the bosses. You can't just dive in brandishing your sword with reckless abandon. You need to jump, throw, bomb, launch arrows, or use your hook shot to make your way past them, and ultimately to the magical instrument of that dungeon. I'm sure many of you also know that there's a version of this for the Game Boy Color called Link's Awakening DX or Deluxe. Now that version isn't just some colorized version like something Turner did with old movies back in the day. It also has a few of its own tweaks and changes up some of the graphics that makes synergy with the Game Boy printer, and also has its own dungeon which completion gives you the ability to get a red or blue tunic, which will increase your attack or defense depending. Now, a lot of reviewers specifically will talk about that version because it does have the extras. This is the one that I grew up with, that's why I chose to review that. But that said, I do have Link's Awakening DX downloaded on Virtual Console on my 3DS. As I said before, this is my absolute favorite game on the original Game Boy. Granted, it does show its age, it is far from perfect, but it's something I enjoy a great deal. Chances are, if you're a Game Boy fan like me, you've probably already played this before, but if you haven't, do check this or the deluxe version out. Hope you've enjoyed this video, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Take care. If you like what you see, please feel free to subscribe. Also, you can get in touch with me on various social media outlets. You can find the links to those down in the description of this video. New videos are uploaded every Monday and occasionally on Thursdays as well. Once again, thank you for watching. Take care.